My name is Erica, and I'm 39 years old. My husband, Mark, is 6 years older than me, and we've been married for over 15 years. We have a daughter, Nancy, who just started high school. After Nancy was born, I decided to start my handmade business, which has been growing fast. I've been getting busier with more orders, but my marriage hasn't been as great. I met Mark when he was my trainer at work. He was 6 years older, and I thought he was very mature. He asked me out, and we started dating. I soon found out I was pregnant, and though it was unexpected, we decided to get married. When I got pregnant, I was really sick with morning sickness. Mark asked me to quit my job and become a stay-at-home wife. That's when things started to get tough. Once I was a housewife, I had to do the housework at my mother-in-law's house, too. They lived only 5 minutes away, so it was expected that I would help out. I had just quit my job, I was dealing with morning sickness, and I could barely take care of my own house, let alone hers. I kept asking Mark to say no to her, but he wouldn't. He and my mother-in-law kept telling me, "You're a wife now, so it's your job." I felt trapped. My parents lived far away, so I couldn't depend on them. Plus, I was pregnant and had already quit my job. Divorce didn't seem like an option. Thankfully, Mark was kind to Nancy, so I tried to cope. My mother-in-law was also kind to her, but that only lasted for a few years. When Mark's brother had a son, my mother-in-law became much stricter with Nancy. She would say, "Why isn't she a boy?" Mark also started to care more about what his mother thought, and he stopped showing the same love for Nancy that he used to. Mark often blamed me, saying things like, "I'm the eldest son and heir, but I don't have any male children," using his mother's words. Mark's family doesn't own a business or land. They have a vegetable garden and a big backyard, but they gave up their land years ago. I didn't understand why Mark cared so much about heirs. My mother-in-law often used old-fashioned terms like eldest son and heir, and I didn't want Nancy to hear them. While I was pregnant, I avoided my parents-in-law's house. They called me constantly, but after Nancy was born, I started ignoring their calls. I didn't want to be around their selfish behavior. I wanted to spend more time with my daughter, and I had the right to say no. Finally, when Nancy turned 2, I decided to go back to work. Mark and my mother-in-law were not happy about it, but I knew it was the right choice for me. I knew my in-laws would be upset, so I waited until I had a job in daycare for my daughter before telling them. A friend I met at work recommended that I try making handmade goods, which I started as a hobby. Eventually, I turned my hobby into a business. It all started when I showed a friend my work. She said, "Wow, it's beautiful. If it's okay with you, I'd like to buy it." I was so happy to hear that, so I gave it to her. Then her friends started buying my things, and word spread. More and more people came to buy my items. I decided to sell my work online, and soon, I had too many orders to handle. It started as a side job, but I couldn't keep up anymore, so I quit my job and became a full-time artist. I still keep some distance from my in-laws, but I have to visit them for holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas. As my daughter got older, my mother-in-law started making her do housework, too. She'd say, "She's a girl, there's nothing else she can do." I felt furious when I heard that, but my daughter calmed me down. "It's just a few times a year when we visit Grandma, I'm fine with it. If I didn't help, you'd be the only one doing it," she added, doing the chores quietly. Seeing her do that made me feel sad, and I almost cried. Meanwhile, my husband was just enjoying himself, drinking and having fun with his relatives. That made me feel even worse. One day, when my daughter came home from school, she was acting different. She looked deep in thought and called me over. "What's wrong? Did something happen at school?" She shook her head, but she seemed upset. My daughter is usually calm, and I'd never seen her cry since middle school. I waited for her to speak, and after a while, she finally said something. "Dad, what about him?" Tears started to form in her eyes. He was hugging a woman. Then, she broke down in tears, like a dam had broken inside her. As time passed, my husband and I spoke less and less. We were still involved in our daughter's life, but it wasn't the same. Because of everything that happened with my in-laws and the things that came after, I felt like I had almost no love left for my husband, but as long as he stayed faithful, I thought it was okay. He never helped with housework or childcare, but I didn't hold that against him. I didn't want my daughter to grow up in a single-parent home, so I convinced myself it was fine. My husband and I never smiled together, but when it was just the 3 of us, we could laugh and enjoy each other's company. That's what kept me going through all the hard times. But then, My daughter told me that my husband was hugging a woman I didn't know. She was crying, and all I could say was, "I see." I felt so angry that my eyes turned red. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said. "Why are you apologizing, Nancy?" She couldn't speak and just looked down. I realized seeing me so shocked was probably hurting her too. "I'm sorry, I'm such a weak mother." "No, Nancy, you didn't do anything wrong," I said. I wanted to keep my emotions in check, but seeing her face, with tears soaking her uniform, broke me. She was shaking, her fists clenched tightly. I couldn't forgive him. I gently put my hands on her clenched fists, and tears I had been holding back started to fall. "I can't forgive him either," I said, feeling more certain than ever. When my husband came home, I knew I had to speak to him. "Honey, can I talk to you for a minute?" I said. "I'm tired," he muttered, not even looking at me. Normally, his cold tone would have made me stay quiet, but today felt different. "I have something important to tell you." He clicked his tongue and sat down across from me at the dining table. "What have you been up to today?" he asked, annoyed. "What are you asking me?" He raised his voice, slamming his hand on the table. I didn't react to his outburst. I kept my focus and said calmly, "I saw you hugging a woman." "What?" he said, looking surprised. I didn't tell him Nancy had seen it. He seemed upset, his face tightening. "So what? What about it?" "Are you cheating on me?" I asked, my voice shaking. He laughed loudly. What else could it be? His attitude was so offensive that I couldn't find the right words to say. He stared at me, noticing that I was losing my composure. "What's wrong with that? What do you have to complain about?" "What? It's an affair." "It's not like I had any feelings for you," he said coldly, as if it was just a fact. I froze when he said that, as if it was no big deal. "We got married because you got pregnant, and we had no choice. We stayed together because we had no choice. What more do you want from me?" "What, no choice? That's the only reason?" "I've been with you all this time, and I've supported you." He laughed, as if he had won the argument. When my husband found the divorce papers I had prepared, he snatched them from me. "Divorce papers? What's this?" "You thought if you showed me divorce papers, I'd listen to you? Nonsense. If you want it so bad, I'll fill them out for you," he said, laughing. He quickly filled out the papers and threw them at me. "How could you get a divorce? I'm the one who's been taking care of you. You're not even working now. You quit your job just because you're having a baby. You're a loser. You can turn in the papers if you want, but you don't even have the nerve," he mocked. I just stared at the divorce papers on the floor as his voice echoed in my ears. "You should be thankful I'm not the one asking for the divorce. If you don't want to get divorced, don't say anything." With that, my husband immediately picked up his phone and started calling someone. "Oh, Alice, it's okay. You can call me or see me anytime now," he said sweetly, and I knew right away he was talking to his girlfriend, but I couldn't say anything. A month later, it was time for our annual visit to my in-laws' house for Christmas. My husband was getting ready, excited for the visit. "Hey," I said, trying to get his attention. "Get ready, I'm ready to go." He rushed me. "I need to talk to you later. I don't have time now." "They make time for me at your parents' house, all right?" he snapped, already in a hurry. He rushed me and Nancy into the car, and the whole way there, he was the only one talking cheerfully. "Oh, welcome home." My mother-in-law greeted us with a smile when we arrived. She took us into the living room, and we greeted all the relatives who were already there. "I'm so glad to see your face after a long time," my mother-in-law said, emphasizing the long time as if she was unhappy that I hadn't been visiting often. "As my daughter-in-law, you need to do my chores too," she told me, as she always did, but she never said that to my brother-in-law's wife, probably because they lived far away. "Well, work, my mother-in-law said, asking me to go to the kitchen. At first, I didn't mind helping. "You can stay here, Nancy." "Hey, Nancy, you too." She urged my daughter to join me in the kitchen. "No," my daughter refused. My mother-in-law whispered to me, "You're a girl, you should be able to do this, right?" Something inside me snapped. "Honey, what?" I called out to my husband, who was preparing a drink. "What?" "I need to talk to you." "I was talking about it before. We can talk later," he said, annoyed. "I don't care," I said firmly. "No, it has to be now. Erica, let's work on this first, shall we?" Let's work on this first, okay? You can talk later, my husband said. My mother-in-law interrupted again, clearly concerned about how her relatives would view her. You are my daughter-in-law, and I have a lot of things for you to do. She looked around, then whispered, on Christmas Day, I'm going to push her and her daughter around. At that moment, I took a deep breath, stood up, and grabbed my daughter's hand. As I have divorced, so goodbye, I said, heading for the door. What? My husband and mother-in-law screamed in shock. I ignored them and tried to leave with Nancy, but they stopped us. Hey, what do you mean by divorce? My mother-in-law shouted. I turned to face them. My husband was clueless, of course, because he was hearing about it for the first time. I mean it as it is. I divorced this man. What? Wait, I didn't hear anything about it. What's going on? My husband said, confused. You told me if I wanted a divorce, I could go ahead and turn in the papers, didn't you? What? My husband was speechless, caught completely off guard. I don't think he ever imagined I'd actually go through with it. How optimistic of him. I almost admired his audacity. You weren't joking, were you? No, I wasn't. Thanks for the divorce papers, I've already filed them. Why are you telling me this here? Is that what you're mad about? I glanced around at the busy relatives. My husband is very proud, he hates being embarrassed, but this is what he deserves. I've asked you 1,000 times to talk, but you always said later. You're the one who kept putting it off, I said. It's simple, he knew what I was talking about. He's the one who filled out the divorce papers. He's the one who said I could file them. He's the one who refused to make time to talk until today. But my mother-in-law wasn't satisfied. What's going on? I can't believe you're divorcing. For my son to want a divorce, you must have done something wrong, Erica. She immediately decided I was the one to blame and yelled at me. Oh, you think I'm at fault? How can you say that when your son is shaking? My husband knew he was wrong and was completely stunned by the conversation. Divorce? How will I explain this to others? Look at you, you don't like it, do you? You'll rethink it and take back your divorce. In the end, all she cares about is her image and pride, my mother-in-law said. She seemed to get an idea and turned to Nancy. Why? What? Why should she take it back? Nancy gave her grandmother and my husband a cold look. Because Dad is cheating on Mom. What? My mother-in-law froze. My husband had no idea Nancy knew, so he asked, Nancy, why? I saw it. I saw you hugging a woman. What? Nancy, it's okay. She was so disgusted, she didn't even want to talk to her father anymore. I felt sorry for her. Maybe I should have stopped her from coming today, even though she wanted to. Are we done? Then excuse us, I said, ready to leave. Cheating is just an accusation. What? That's slander. You have no proof. I'm not divorcing you. My husband suddenly said something like that, and I was shocked. How could he say that? You don't have proof, do you? Why don't you want a divorce? Is it because of your reputation? You said you never loved me. No way. Hearing his shaky words, I pulled out a few photos from my bag and spread them on the table. What? These are the proof. The pictures showed my husband holding hands with a young woman. No denying it. There's no way out of this. My husband's face turned red as he quickly gathered the photos. Why did you? I think you've gone too far. I never said I accept cheating. He must have thought I wouldn't do anything about his cheating. He was so open with this woman. I had even hired a detective agency to follow him. The detective easily gathered evidence by placing a hidden microphone in the woman's bag and recording their conversations. You've been talking about me a lot, haven't you? What a free housekeeper. How did you know that? When I said that, my husband's face went pale. All the relatives were watching him. My mother-in-law, Mary, I'm not your son's servant. No. Even though I married your son, I have no duty to take care of this house. I don't have an obligation. I'm done. From now on, contact my lawyer. After saying that, my daughter and I left. I had already filed the divorce papers, but I later requested alimony. He tried to resist, but with the solid proof I had, he gave up. I also filed a claim against the woman he was cheating with, and she agreed to pay. As word spread about my ex-husband and mother-in-law, their relatives and neighbors were ashamed. They care so much about their reputation. I'm sure the gossip in the neighborhood is tough on them. My daughter and I are now living a new life. I'm a handmade artist, and my business is booming. I get so many online orders that I can't keep up. My daughter told me it's all over social media. I'm finally free from all the things that held me back. I've realized how hard my life was before. Back then, things were so difficult. I made my daughter go through some tough things, but now she talks about it like it's a story. I'm grateful to her for that. From now on, I'm going to do what I want, take care of my daughter, and enjoy life.